There has never been a better time for the WNBA to flex their worker power and potentially do a lockout if it means they get what they want in this newest CBA negotiation. I'm here to explain. And a very happy Wednesday to everybody here on No Cap Space WBB. Andrew Hobner with you. Happy to be with you. Happy you're here with us. We have one hell of a week coming up here for the No Cap Space team. Tyler and Shawnee are going to be in Indianapolis for All-Star Weekend, giving you all sorts of great coverage. So make sure if you haven't signed up, subscribe to the Substack, to YouTube, followed us on socials like TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, Facebook, wherever you get it. We will have it. You will not want to miss it because there is a ton of great stuff that they have on the ground coming for you. But that is not what I am here talking about today. Instead, I'm here talking about a recent New York Post article that came out just earlier this week discussing the possibility of a potential work stoppage in the WNBA. So we'll open this up right now. This is from Madeline Kenny. This was published yesterday on the New York Post. WNBA players bracing for work stoppage with pivotal meeting looming. Now, I want to be clear to everybody that is listening. This is a good thing if it happens. However, we are still so early on in this that a headline like that is a little bit of clickbait, and I will explain why. So for starters, for those that don't know the background here, the WNBA is in a contract negotiation year. Effectively, the players have voted to opt out of their collective bargaining agreement. That is the legal framework in which the league operates and has an agreement between the players union and the league itself. It sets things like a salary cap, how much players can be paid, what benefits players get, retirements, maternity leave, etc. And it is meant to ensure competitive balance and equity. It is also meant to establish a baseline all the way across for all players and for all teams in the league. Every single sports league has it, and the WNBA is no different. Now, the players voted to opt out of their current CBA, which means that they are in negotiations with the league. The reason this is coming up in the news now is because All-Star Weekend is going to see a meeting occur between the biggest players in the union. So, that's your executive committee, your Nafisa Collier's, Brianna Stewart's. The early reports are that Caitlyn Clark is going to be a part of this as well. And then on the other side of the table, you're going to have the representatives from the league. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, as well as executive members from the Board of Governors, which is basically a long way of saying the owners. And they are going to have their first really serious meeting. The strange thing about some of the reporting that has happened here lately is, Stewie got on and talked about how the league and them had not really had much of a conversation yet. And the actual quote and tweet sounded a lot worse than it was. It sounded like the league had ignored them or walked away from everything. And the reality was that was the very first email correspondence. And I want people to think a little bit harder when we are talking about the possibility of a work stoppage, because this is the language of negotiation. The league is telling the players there's no money. The players are saying we can find the money elsewhere. That is standard negotiating procedure and tactics. You don't budge an inch in the public, they don't budge an inch in the public, and then eventually behind closed doors you come together and figure something out. I do not feel that players want a work stoppage here. I don't think they want a lockout. Asia Wilson came out earlier in the summer and said she doesn't want one, which I thought was a really interesting break from the general player posture, because it came right on the heels of Angel Reese and Dejanay Carrington on Angel's podcast saying, we will strike. Nafisa Collier and Brianna Stewart have come out and said, we will strike if need be. And so I'm interested to see the Caitlyn Clark of it all now that she is involved, which is a really smart thing from the players' perspective, because it shows me two things. First and foremost, it shows me that Caitlyn's into this too. And my thing with Caitlyn has always been, you do not have to give us performative displays of advocacy. I don't really care if Caitlyn Clark goes out and does like the Paige Becker's SB speech. There's more than one way to be an advocate. I don't like the term ally. I reject that term. I prefer the term advocate because it's more proactive than reactive. And Paige Beckers has decided through the course of her career to be an advocate in a very particular way. And that's good. Any movement that advocates for equity and equal treatment of people needs those that will be comfortable getting out up front, in front of people, and putting it out on the line the way that she does. But the movements also need a Caitlyn Clark, someone who might not be as out front, but is willing to push their power behind the scenes. And we saw that happen last year with Caitlyn trying to see if there was a way for players to get a cut of these games in which they would go to larger arenas because of the effect that she had on the game itself. My thing with her is always, it seems like Caitlyn Clark moves in silence a little bit more and pushes to exercise her advocacy in different ways. And the fact that she's at the table now, as per the reports that we've seen, is really cool to me, because of what that tells me is like, she's down for this. Like she understands her power. She understands her leverage. She understands the ability to say the way to garner respect within this league, the way to get respect of your peers, the way to really take what you have, which is a unique, very unique sense of power and pulpit, and be able to use that in the boardrooms and the back rooms that allow you to make real change for yourself and those around you. That's a huge thing for the players to have her on their side. It's also a massive leverage point against the league, because what the league will do, and what any type of like manager or bargaining apparatus will do, is try to split the worker, right? Anytime you see union negotiations, there's always this discussion of like the non-unionized employees and them being promised certain things by management because it avoids a solidarity within the workforce. And that was the interesting thing about Asia's thing, is I was thinking to myself, do you really want to come out in the middle of the spring the way that she did and break with the solidarity of your fellow players? And now the league may feel like they have an in to you or other players that might not want a strike or agree with a strike. Whereas everybody else seems in pretty lockstep with the idea that you can walk away from this. So that meeting is going to happen at All-Star. It's going to include Caitlyn. It's going to include Fee, Stewie. I'm sure Asia's going to be in the room. And I have seen a lot of discussion about the WNBA can't afford a lockout right now. And that's true that the league can. The players absolutely can. And the thing for me is that the players have more leverage than they have ever had. Because when you look at the business metrics and the improvements that we have seen over the course of the last 2 seasons, it is pretty obvious that this league has a lot of money to make. It's clear that the league is turning a corner in terms of its business and its values. And I think that stuff matters in a huge, huge way when we talk about what the league can and cannot do, right? So, there are a couple of different stories here. And let me pull up, not the Sportico one, because that's paywalled. I'm going to pull a separate story here that opens up about sponsor media value. And this to me is the important thing that people need to remember. The league signed a media deal that was part of the NBA's TV deal. It's worth $2.2 billion, most valuable TV deal that the WNBA has ever had. It's one of the most valuable TV deals in women's sports history. But where the NBA especially is trying to make their money is here. Sponsor media, social media, engagement metrics, watch hours, watch time. Caitlyn Clark and Paige push those things. The next generation of players, whether it be AZ, Hannah Hidalgo, Olivia Miles, Flauge, Juju, all of those players, if you go to TikTok or Instagram and these places where the NBA and by extension the WNBA wants to be, they are there. And they are there in huge, huge, huge numbers. Angel and Caitlyn both drive massive traffic on those sites. And if you are a league that wants that type of value, you can get it. Now, the WNBA, as it is currently constructed, has a $500 million franchise already. It's the Golden State Valkyries. And an average, this is according to a 2025 Forbes article that I want to show people here. The average of the WNBA franchise, like your average value, $272 million. Now, that doesn't feel like a lot because when you think about men's sports, you're thinking about, everybody's worth $1 billion, right? But when you look at women's sports and you look at what the value sales were, your average franchise is $272 million. The get in for Golden State 2 years ago was $50 million. So the average has already 5x'd over the expansion fee. And so because of that, you now can see a very tangible display of increasing value year over year, especially as we get the Portland Fire, the Toronto Tempo, Cleveland's next franchise, Detroit's next franchise, all of whom, mind you, are owned by billionaires effectively. And so with that component of all of this, you can see where the players feel they have a great opportunity to say, we can go over to Europe. There's two other 5x5 leagues that are being created. Fran Harris's Exalt League, former WNBA commissioner Donna Arenda's got a 5x5 league that's coming online, and it's based in Jacksonville. Unrivaled has 3x3 and a TV deal of its own. And so it's one of those things where I feel like because there are playing options, it would not destroy the players as much as it would mess around with the league. Now, the asks don't seem supremely significant, right? Based on what I have heard, the players want a higher revenue share, and the rev share right now sits at about 9%. And this is what's important to consider here about how the revenue shares work. In the NBA, for instance, it's 51-49. So the players get 49% of the revenues generated by the league. The board of governors, which are the owners, get 51%, right? Now, the issue in the W is that the W is not a wholly owned entity. The NBA owns a chunk of the W. I think it's something like 20% of the W is owned by the NBA. And because of that, you've got dudes in the NBA that don't actually have an ownership stake in a franchise that take money off the top. So if it's 10%, I believe 9.3 is the rev share for players to the league, right? If the rev share is 9.3%, you have to carve off pieces of that 9% before you actually get to the player share, which when you actually do the math, I think it takes it down somewhere between 5 to 7%. Howard Magdal had something really good on this a while back, and I'll find the story while I'm talking. Because it basically creates an environment where the number might seem big, but it's actually not. The number actually cuts down so substantially that you would not be able to make things worthwhile in a lot of ways. And while I can understand people saying, well, the players are just now getting interesting and why would you squander all this goodwill? If you're a worker, if you're in the WNBA right now, there's never been a better chance to do it than right now. Because in past years, in past CBAs, the argument has been for smaller benefits, maternity leave benefits, retirement benefits, incremental salary increases. The league's players union has never actually gone super hard on salary increases because they've been so busy laying the groundwork and infrastructure for all of these other kind of cost of living improvements and adjustments that allow you to kind of make it up on the back end from a money perspective. Now is the time. There's money out there everywhere. Now is the time to push. And while everyone brings up the W loses money every year, every league is going to say this every year. The NBA says this during negotiations. Major League Baseball says this during negotiations, that they lose money as a league, that they have franchises losing money, and thus they do not have the ability to give players what they need or want. And I would encourage people to understand here that the players being compensated more for what they do is only going to make the product better because it creates more investment in the developmental pipelines. It creates more investment in the league's officiating, for instance, which we know is a huge problem. It creates improvements in the fan experience because it forces owners to step up a little bit more. And in a lot of ways, I think that this is the best time for the players to potentially do it. It is still really early in this process, mind you. This is the first face-to-face meeting we're going to get at All-Star, and I feel pretty good about the idea that there's going to be more posturing leaving this, where we're going to hear a lot more discussion about lockout, a lot more discussion about potential strikes. And I want people to understand that even if you think the league has not conducted itself in a professional manner up to this point, which I think there are fair places to critique that in good faith, if you want the league to look professional, to appear more professional, to do more things that align with the leagues that you liked watching or like watching before you came in as a result of Caitlyn or Angel or Paige or whoever, then I think what people need to understand is that they need to have this. Like the players need to have this because if they are able to get this, it is going to be better for everyone. We're going to dive into this a little bit further on Ball Up Top next week, but wanted to touch on that because of that post article is getting a lot of play and wanted to discuss just a little bit of broad strokes and keep it moderately short. And after this, keep on with us. Subscribe, like, do all the things you need to do to get us into your feeds and keep an eye out for all of our coverage at All-Star Weekend this coming weekend. And that's all we got. Andrew Hobner. Subscribe to No Cap Space WBB. We'll see y'all soon.